Hi students, are you ready to get down to business? All right, so we need to do the Unit 5 test composition. So remember, in the plan, you just click more and it takes you directly to the content. You will right click on your Unit 5 test, open link in new window. Get that test going. And then you're going to resize it. I squeeze mine right over to the side so I can still read it and still have a little handle over here so I can scroll up and down and see all of the questions at one time. All right, so we have 15 questions, and over here, this window, I'm going to click on the introduction and resize this window. So I can see the whole thing and I can still see my test as well. So let's see how this goes. Let's read the question, the first question in this class. It's really nice because the questions go in the same order as the online textbook. Question 1, the rule of thirds is a way to divide an image file so it will fit on a floppy disk, compose the image so you can offset your subject, archive your images on 3 master CDs, or divide the image into specific areas for processing later. Let's find out. Whether it's a paper for school, a letter, or a post on your favorite website, it's up to you to determine what you want in it and how all of it fits together. The same thing is true in photography. The elements you include in your images can be choppy with little relationship between them, or they can be smooth, showing their relationships, making a complete image. The key is how you compose your photographs and how all of the elements work together. With good composition, you have a dynamic photograph that invites people to look. Photographic composition introduction. Composition is how you arrange the subject and the other elements you have in your photograph. It is what you include in the frame, what supporting details you think will give us more information about the subject. Maybe more importantly, it is what you don't think will give us more information and leave out of the frame. You learned about this in earlier units. But more than that, good composition gives the person looking at your photograph something to do. It helps guide their eyes around the image so they see the whole thing. There are different ways to compose a photograph. We're going to look at a couple of them. Apply the rule of thirds to image composition. Apply the use of leading lines to image composition. Explain the use of viewpoint and perspective in image composition. Those are our objectives. The rule of thirds. Ooh, I know we're going to be finding out what this is, and that was our first question. The rule of thirds is one of the basic guides for composing photographs. This rule came to us from the early photographers. Almost all of them were painters before they were photographers. It was only natural that they would bring their approach to composition with them. The rule of thirds is a way to offset the subject in the image so it will appear to be more dynamic than simply putting the subject in the center. This is also called giving the image some motion. Now, there is really nothing moving in a photograph, but putting the subject off center allows the viewer's eye to move through the image. Let's look at applying this to your photographs. So there we go. Divide an image compose an image so it will offset your subject. Number 2. Offsetting your subject should be done as it may prevent processing later. Should not be done, sorry. Should be done as it will allow processing later, is a way of making your photograph more dynamic. Can be a distraction as it will take the viewer's eye off the subject. All right, so being dynamic means there's movement, there's energy, right? And that was the purpose. Good job. 2 down. Let's find out what the third one is. The rule of thirds came into photography from early photographers who were first painters. Ding, 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 ding. Okay, we already know that's the answer, but let's read the rest of them just in case. Early camera makers who found that it was easier to explain to amateur photographers. No. Early SMPTE standards? No. Common use by early photo printers and then later became a rule? No. All right. To apply the rule of thirds, you first divide the viewfinder into 3 equal horizontal divisions. Divide the viewfinder into 3 vertical divisions. Divide the viewfinder into 3 equal triangular divisions, or apply a tic-tac-toe grid to the viewfinder. I wonder what it could be. Tic-tac-toe and the rule of thirds. To use the rule of thirds, simply divide your viewfinder into a tic-tac-toe board. Hey, let's just go ahead and answer the question. Ding. Next. After you divide the viewfinder appropriately, you locate the subject along one of the division lines, to the left or right of the division if the composition is horizontal, to the above or below the division if the composition is vertical, or both B and C. Let's see. To use the rule of thirds, simply divide your viewfinder into a tic-tac-toe board and place your subject on one of the lines. You can do this with the viewfinder in either landscape or portrait orientation, and you can use either the vertical or horizontal lines. Let's see if that was one of the answers. Along one of the division lines or on one of the lines. Very good. Supporting details are details that, and let's get into that in a minute. Let's say you're taking a portrait of a friend. Use a portrait orientation and place your friend's eyes roughly on the top horizontal line. Let's go back to our example of taking the portrait in the park with your friend leaning against a tree. This is in landscape orientation. We'll tell you why in a minute. In the image, you would place your friend along the line to the left side of the tic-tac-toe board. You are in landscape orientation, so you can get all of the park stuff in the background. Working with larger subjects. But let's say what you're photographing is too big to align with one of the lines on the tic-tac-toe board, like your friend's car. When taking photographs of the car that include her, put her roughly on one of the lines and let the car fill the rest of the frame. When you're photographing just the car, put some important feature along the line. If you're photographing a building, for example, put some prominent feature roughly on the line and let the rest of the building fill the frame. Self-check activity. To see what you've learned, spend a few minutes on the self-check. Rule of thirds. How you divide your viewfinder to apply one of the guidelines of composition. I would probably say that was the rule of thirds. I'm going to start this side. The topic of your photograph is the subject. One of the guidelines in photo composition. I guess I would go with rule of thirds for that. And then how you divide your viewfinder to apply one of the guidelines of composition. Gosh, I'm having a hard time between rule of thirds and offset. Principle of composition to give your images motion. Rule of thirds. Oh, I feel like all of these are rule of thirds. Elements in the composition giving more information. So the elements would be D. The supporting details. Remember, supporting details give more information. A principle of composition that gives your images motion. I'm just going to say C, offset. One of the guidelines. How you divide is the tic-tac-toe. Okay, the topic of your photograph is the subject. And one of the guidelines in photo composition, I'll say rule of thirds. Let's see if I get it right. Oh, I did it. Boy, that was challenging. Lining things up. Let's see what it says over here. Supporting details. Add information to the subject. I think we already know that. I don't know if they're going to talk about that, but we already know that, right? So let's just go ahead and click that and see what the next one. It says, using lines in photographic composition can... All right, let's find out. Lining things up. Using lines is another basic of photographic composition. Lines can lead the eye around the photograph very effectively. They are also called leading lines. Lines can be thick or thin. They can be stated or implied. There are three kinds of lines. There are vertical lines, horizontal lines, and diagonal lines. Vertical and horizontal lines are said to be static, that is, unmoving. They do not give the composition any motion at all. Diagonal lines are the only lines that can give the composition any motion. You tend to follow any diagonal lines in an image from left to right. This is because we read from left to right. Let's see what it says here. Using lines in a photographic composition. All right, we're going to keep on going. Thinking in terms of lines. Lines are everywhere. There are so many lines that we often fail to recognize them as lines. Here are some examples of stated lines. You can probably come up with many more if you give it some thought. The corner of a building, that is a stated line. The lines in the road or the curb along the road, that is a stated line. A fence or a railing, yes, that is a stated line. Street light and telephone poles, here's a pole back here, stated line. Train tracks, right here, stated line. The edge of a table or counter. All right, so let's move on. While stated lines are those you can see, there are just as many unstated or implied lines. Here are some examples, and again, you can probably come up with many more if you give it some thought. The direction of a person's gaze. The direction a person is moving. The direction a person is walking or a car is driving. The line formed by a row of telephone poles along a road. So while there technically isn't a line right here, we can see an implied line that's leading our eyes straight to the back. And as you can see, it's diagonal, and our eyes are going to follow that diagonal line. While you can't see these lines, they can be extremely important in helping move your eye around the image. How are we doing here on these questions? All right, using lines in photographic composition can become very distracting and should be avoided. Cause the person viewing your photograph to focus on some minor area, make your composition look like it was set on a grid, effectively lead the viewer's eye around the frame. Let's go with that one. All right, lines in a photograph are straight, implied, stated or implied. Very good. Which of the following is not a stated line? So this would be an implied line, one that's not an actual line in the picture, but it's implied. Would it be a fence? No, we could see the line of a fence, so that would be a stated line. Is it the line of a road? No, we'd be able to see the line in the road. Is it the direction of a person's glance? Yes, it is the direction of a person's glance, because there's not a line coming out of your eyeball across the image, but you can see the line of which that person is looking toward. The edge of a building, we'd be able to see that line, so that's an implied, or a stated line. All right, next, which of the following is not an implied? Don't you hate it when they ask you the negative? Why couldn't they just say, hey, which one's implied, which one's not? Because they're testing your IQ. And so yeah, just we're looking for the opposite of implied, which would be stated. Would a stated line be the curb of a street? Yes. The direction of a person's glance? No, that's implied. The direction of a car moving? No, that's implied. The direction a person's pointing? No, that's implied. Alrighty. Number 11, what is the only line in a photograph that can imply motion? Diagonal. Number 12, a very tight perspective has some supporting detail, has no supporting detail, has an average amount of supporting detail, or conforms to the PPA 90% standard. Let's find out. Ooh, but first, self-check activity. The only type of line that can show motion is a diagonal line. A line in an image that has a physical presence, such as a building corner or the line in a road, is a Stated line. A line in an image that has no physical presence, such as the direction a car is driving or a person is looking. That's an implied line. These are either vertical or horizontal lines. They are static or non-moving. One of the basic guidelines for photographic composition is the rule of thirds. Woohoo! Compose with contrast. Another way to compose photographs is by using contrast. You can photograph a light subject against a dark background, or you can photograph a dark subject against a light background. Both of these approaches will make your subject stand out because of the difference between it and the background. Other contrasts you can use when composing your photographs are color, where you photograph a subject of one color against a background of another, and size, where you can photograph something small against something big. Compose with viewpoint. The viewpoint is simply where you are vertically in relationship to your subject. There are essentially 3 viewpoints. A low viewpoint is where you are below your subject looking up. This can have a very dramatic effect and can put the subject in a superior position to the person who is looking at your photograph. Be careful with this viewpoint in portraits, as you can be looking right up someone's nose. A normal viewpoint is taken from the normal standing position, or a position where you're on the same level as your subject. This is the most common viewpoint used in photography. A high viewpoint is taken from above the subject and is a more observational viewpoint. And may I also suggest that when you're taking pictures of people who are older, take a high viewpoint, because it will hide all of our chins. Like when we get older, we get triple chins, and that's the way that it makes us look more slim. We like that. Perspective. Perspective is how far it appears you are from the subject of your photograph. This is also called the visual distance or the shot distance. You can control this by the setting you use on the camera's zoom lens. There are essentially 4 different perspectives in photography. A long shot makes it look like you are far away from your subject. It includes a lot of the background. While this really puts your subject in a context, you run the risk of a cluttered background distracting from your subject. A medium shot makes it look like you are a normal distance from your subject, includes some of the background. We still have a good bit of context in this perspective. A tight shot makes it look like you're very close to the subject, and most of the background has been eliminated. Almost all of the context has been eliminated here. A very tight shot fills the frame with nothing but your subject. All context is lost in this shot. All right. A very tight perspective has no supporting detail. Remember, context is those supporting details, right? So the high shot has nothing else in the image, so there's no supporting detail. Question number 13. A medium perspective falls between vision and a wide angle, falls between normal vision, approximates normal human vision, is a photograph taken from the normal standing position. Let's see. A normal distance from your subject and includes some of the background. I am assuming that they mean is a photograph taken from the normal standing position. Yeah, I'm hoping that's what they meant, because it's not like using the same words, and that could be interpreted different ways. So let us hope that that's what they meant. Perspective is defined as the distance it appears you are from the subject of your photograph, the angle between the camera and the subject, the viewfinder setting that matches the lens setting, a normal viewpoint. Perspective is how far it appears you are from your subject's photographed. This is also called the visual distance. So which one of those talks about distance? Good. The distance it appears you are from your subject. And finally, question 15. A normal viewpoint is an image taken from the normal standing position, above the subject, below the subject, a location 6 to 8 feet away from your subject. A normal viewpoint, is that what they're referring to? A normal viewpoint, here we go, is taken from the normal standing position or a position where you are on the same level as your subject. Here we go, the normal standing position. Okay, so that means you're not above or below your subject. You're on the same level as your subject. Perfect. All right, well, hopefully you got all of those correct, and you'll go ahead and save your answers and then submit your answers. And let's see if there's anything else. These 3 examples will show you the 4 perspectives: long, medium, tight, and very tight. So there's the long perspective. You know, it doesn't have any details in there that don't contribute to the context. There's nothing distracting. It's perfect. Medium, so yeah, we're a little closer. We can see more detail. Tight. I guess I would have considered tight to be a little closer, and I would have been cutting out some of the water here personally. Very tight. Yeah, see, I don't know, because they said there would be absolutely no background in a very tight composition. I don't think that this adheres very well. This is, for me, not a good example. There's context here. There's like water. I can tell this is in the water. Now, if you got in really tight to me and you would like cropped in tightly on this dock here, I would have no context. I would not know what that wood was to. Wouldn't know if it was to a fence or to a barn or what. So that might help to give you some perspective. Reviewing composition. Let's review what we've learned about composition. The thirds rule is a way to divide an image so that it will fit on a floppy disk. No. A way to compose the image so you can offset your subject. Yes. Offsetting your subject is a way of making your photograph more dynamic. After you divide the viewfinder appropriately, you locate the subject on one of your division lines. Using lines in photographic composition can help effectively lead the viewer's eye around the frame. Which of the following is not an implied line? In other words, which of the following is a stated line? The curb of a street. To apply the rule of thirds, you first apply a tic-tac-toe grid to the viewfinder. Lines in a photograph can be stated or implied. A very tight perspective has no supporting detail. A medium perspective is a photograph taken from the normal standing position. Oh, goodness. I got it wrong. Sorry, you better correct that on your tests. Let's try it again. Try again. Here we go. Approximates normal human vision. My bad. Got one wrong. See what I mean? That's the way that they stated it. It was just stated differently. They used different vocabulary. You know, we can interpret it differently. The rule of thirds came into photography from early photographers who were painters first. Perspective is defined as a visual distance to the subject. A normal viewpoint is an image taken from a normal standing position. Supporting details are details that add more information to the subject. The only line in a photograph that can imply motion is a diagonal line. Which of the following is not a stated line? In other words, which one is an implied line? The direction of a person's gaze. All right, there we go. So we got all of them but one correct. You can fix that on your test. And let's see here. I think that about does it. Go ahead and submit your test. Have a good day.